Yeah, let's check out this video from Stiorg. A bad launch caused the success of a game. Wuthering Waves. So the okay, let's just think about this. The game's bad launch has made the game successful. Let's see what he's got to say, because I don't know necessarily how that's the case. I think they've done a lot of good work since the launch, but would the actual bad launch be the reason why the game's successful? That's what he's got to say.
Yo, as you read from the title, Wuthering Waves' bad launch saved the game.
And so many people call it weathering. It doesn't trigger me. It don't trigger me.
Today I'm gonna talk about why that is, and also how the game would be if nothing wrong actually happened. Imagine.
Okay, alright. Interesting angle to come from. The idea that if the game had a really good launch, it wouldn't be as successful. Interesting.
If Wuthering Waves didn't have any complaints and was 100% optimized, and people had that good experience with it from the start. And why I think it would probably be less successful because of this. As always, I'm not.
Alright, okay, he's got me intrigued now because I don't see where he's coming from here.
I'm gonna waste your time, I'm gonna make this as fast as possible. So now if we take any game's popularity in general, you will see that most games go insanely popular or peak at launch, and then it will lose a lot of players after that.
Probably for the majority, yeah. Definitely for the majority. Some outliers, it's different. They can have world success at the start, but have really problematic launches and then continue on to just be massive, you know. The things like Rainbow Six Siege is a good example of that. Game that came out, had a bit of an issue with the launch. It wasn't the best, but he's been wildly successful over the years and continues to be successful. Off the top of my head, I can't really think of a bunch of different games, but there are a lot of games that, you know, the launch window is usually the most successful part of the game, isn't it? I think with the gacha space, it depends on the size of the game. Definitely Hoyoverse games seem to really explode on the scene and then just get bigger and bigger and bigger, don't they, really, for the most part? Obviously, the revenue probably drops off after a while, which it does. But yeah, let's continue.
Even if it's a good game, this is normal, and the interest will go lower because, you know, launch is a very big event that's happening, and it should be the biggest thing for the game. And this is the same thing for...
Yeah, that's true. I think it should be a good launch. A game is only delayed until it launches, but a bad launch will forever be remembered as a bad launch. Now, I played on PC, so the launch for Wuthering Waves for me was fine. I loved getting all the free stuff because I was enjoying the game. I was having no issues. It was running fine, and I was just getting free stuff left, right, and center for all the apologies. But I do understand people on mobile were having some major issues, and I think people on some lower-end PCs were getting a bit of issues as well. But yeah, I don't think Wuthering Waves had the worst launch, especially in the modern era. And I say that now, lots of games that were online services over the years, even back in the day, back to the World of Warcraft launches, had issues at launch, queues, problems, technical issues, performance issues, all that sort of stuff. But I do think it's become more of a commonly accepted thing now that games kind of tend to launch with issues. It's more of a rare occurrence, isn't it, that a game launches perfectly.
Or Wuthering Waves. And if Wuthering Waves was very smooth and had a good launch, at least in terms of optimization, it will probably have a good amount of views for some time, and then it will slowly go down. The thing is, developers won't need to panic because there's no big problems. There won't be a free 5-star, there won't be a drama, and the devs will...
So he's going to argue that because the game launched poorly, obviously I'm going ahead before he's even said it, but I'm assuming he's going to argue that because the game launched poorly and they give us a bunch of free stuff is what's made the game a success. If that's going to be the argument, he might prove me wrong here. I'm going to disagree on that. I think it's maybe caused a lot of people who enjoyed the game to want to maybe potentially spend more on the game, or just really give Kuro a little bit more leeway because they were really happy to see a developer being transparent, listening to the community, reacting fast. And that's always good to see. And from a consumer point of view, you love to see when somebody who you're a consumer of actively trying to please you. It's great to see. Well, I don't necessarily think that that's gone on to make the game more of a success than what it potentially would have been. I think the main thing that's doing that for me is the game's just a banger in terms of the combat. It's got its issues, but I think the game just slaps really for the most part.
Will probably not go as hard as they did for the competition.
That's true.
Actually,
that's
if
true.
we look at the...
That's true, but we don't necessarily know that. And I think the reason why I say that is because I think Kuro understand that Hoyo is the big dog and that they're going to have to be a lot more generous and reactive than Hoyo ever need to be. I think, you know, if Hoyo reversed the roles and Kuro was the big dog, let's not pretend that Kuro probably wouldn't be anywhere as generous as what they are. Let's just face it. I like to think the best in people, but if they had the market share of the gacha space, I think they would enjoy that market share and just do what they're doing. I think they understand that, right, we've got to try and put into this market share the best we can by making a good game and really listening to the community as well, which is a great thing, and I'm really happy they have done. And I'm not knocking Kuro at all here. You know, we're just going on hypotheticals that there were the big dogs here, but I kind of think that's how they would have acted. But I'm not taking anything away from them. They have reacted really well to the community.
The curve of Wuthering Waves in terms of interest, it went down on the first day and then it went up again for 2 whole days. And this was because of the amount of problems that the game had in terms of optimizations, and add to that some, you know, voice acting and story problems. So this caused so much drama in global and also in CN. It made Wuthering Waves the talk of the day. People talk.
Okay, that's a valid point. I don't necessarily know if that's what gave the game its success. And in my opinion, we still haven't seen whether Wuthering Waves is going to be successful. I think we need to give it 6 months and then we can look back and go, okay, I think it looks like Wuthering Waves has been a success. We can look at the trends. We can look at the revenue that they're getting. We can look at the updates and what people are talking about online and streaming and just the community in general. I think we're going to need to wait a little bit first. But I don't know if that's necessarily tied to the negative launch. It could be, but I don't know.
Talk about Wuthering Waves even if they don't play gacha. So the game became popular because of its problems. So now a lot of people care about this game that came to compete with Genshin Impact and actually...
I do believe that probably a lot of people do care because of the way the devs have reacted. That's a good point. They probably feel a bit of an affinity towards the developers in the sense that, oh, these guys are looking after us, so I kind of feel some way about them. I get that.
He didn't succeed. After that, Kuro Games did the best thing they can do, which is they cared and devs listened. Doing that
true.
and giving so much free things and a free 5-star from the first week made those people who didn't even care about Wuthering Waves, who only came for the drama, care about Wuthering Waves. And
that's potentially true, you know. Okay, I'm starting to see where he's coming from a little bit more here now. Don't necessarily know if it was the fact. I still think the fact that the game's a good game has done its best service, but it's not. It's probably true to some extent that it brought people through the door who might not have actually done so, maybe.
And think that this game is probably going to have a good future, and we're like, okay, I don't want to miss this free 5-star, let me log in the game now and play the game. And this is exactly what happened. But this is not the most important argument, by the way. This is something very important and very smart that Wuthering Waves did that I will talk about in a minute. But going back here, people are now going back to the game, talking more about the game, and the community was kind of divided. People talking about how this game still have optimization problems, and people saying, okay, devs are listening, and it's so generous, and rewards like these can actually buy the players.
Damn dude, that freaking 500 millisecond ping, oof.
It's actually confirmed now, especially when they had a very good roster of standard characters. But now there is another thing that made it even better. The amount of promises that Kuro Games made. Some of these promises didn't even come to the game yet, but these promises...
Were these made because the game launched badly, or were these just planned anyway? Just playing devil's advocate here.
Help them gain more respect from the players. Even if they weren't going to do it, more players are going to believe that. And this helped.
Yeah, true. I agree with that though, because how they've reacted, I think they've garnered a lot more respect than what they would have done if they'd have just launched the game well. I know that sounds crazy, but if the game had just launched well, people would have gone, sweet, game's good, let's play. But the fact that they stumbled and they got up, they dusted themselves off and went, sorry, here you go. I think people were like, oh, wow, that's kind of cool. I wasn't even having that bad of a time anyway, but thanks. So I guess that is true.
Them stall for another version and make players cope with the game until we got 1.1, and they fulfilled a lot of these promises, which made Wuthering Waves at that point established.
Who's playing as Male Rover, man? Come on. Who's doing that? Stop it.
In the community.
Get some help.
It's a very smart thing that they did. It's not intentional, by the way. That was a very good decision making after rushing the game. Okay, this might be wrong.
Dude, that slide under the blade there where you can just see her tatties. That just reminded me of, oh, damn, what was that anime now? Was it High School of the Dead? When he fires the sniper rifle and it goes, oh, I forgot her name now, and it goes like right between both her boobs. Just reminded me of that.
Right when you hear it, but it doesn't also make sense in the same time when you say, okay, a perfect game will do worse than a game with so many problems. Well, the thing is, Wuthering Waves was functional for most players actually. People who got the problems were a minority, but that wasn't a little
and I think it was a lot of people on mobile as well that really had issues, wasn't it?
A lot of people. Well, like when you say 15% or 20%, that will cause drama, but in the same time, a lot of other people will go like, okay, I'm having fun in the game and I'm also getting free 5 stars. If the game wasn't actually functional for like 40% or 50% of people and like had a lot of other bugs and problems and didn't, for example, have a good gameplay, well, however generous you will be, the game will flop. It's just that
True. Again, this goes back to, like I said, for me, the reason the game has, well, we perceived to have been a success so far is because the core gameplay loop, i.e. the combat, just goes hard. It goes so freaking hard. And that's the main pull for this game. And then you've got good character design. You've got a gorgeous world. You've got the Echo system, which I think is a really cool system. You know, the story's getting better. We're getting more characters introduced. We've definitely, hopefully, getting better voice acting or better voice direction for the voice actors. You know, Chang Li's coming, that's good. Yinlin's good. Jinxi's done well. Scar's great. Hopefully, we're going to see more of that. Jian was pretty decent, in my opinion. There were some others that weren't so great in 1.0, and some of the writing was a little bit poor, but they definitely improved in 1.1 and at the end of 1.0 as well. So they are fixing, or at least it seems like they're fixing some of the weaker parts of the game. But at the end of the day, the gameplay loop just slaps, and we're getting consistent updates at the moment. Potentially, I'd like to see more endgame stuff, and I definitely would like to see more support characters, but I do feel like they are going in the right direction. Again, though, I don't think that's because the game had a bad launch necessarily. I just think it facilitated a lot more potential respect and belief in the developers, which is a good point Steorg made. But I don't necessarily think that's been part of the... It's not been the major part of the success. I think it's been part of the belief that the game is going to be something better, and people have probably stuck around maybe potentially for that goodwill is a possibility.
This game had good gameplay and had good characters and content and holograms. This will never apply to every game. Like, this is hard to be applied to every game. And Wuthering Waves was kinda lucky for going that far, even with these problems at the start. Because I will never, by the way, praise a game that came half-baked or rushed. But at least when...
Yep, agree, you know. Just because it comes out the gate bad and then they fix it, it's not necessarily something to be praised. Again, looking back at games like No Man's Sky, that was an actual farce when the game came out. But I do respect, I don't necessarily praise, but I do respect that the developers have continued to update the game post-launch for years, and it's in a really good state now. That is something to be, I guess, respected, but just not admired, you know?
the devs listen, I would appreciate it. Anyway, if you don't subscribe now, you're gonna lose your 50-50. Bye-bye.
Well, there you go. Another video from Steorg. Great video. You should definitely check out Steorg. He deserves way more subscribers because he does make some great content. Yeah, I agree with some of what he said there. It's a hard thing to disagree with or agree with because it is kind of assuming the reason why the player base stayed. Of course, if a game is just an absolute critical success in terms of, like, you know, everybody's eyes when it launches, it's like, you know, The Last of Us. You can understand why that was a success. It's not hard to see why it wasn't. But to try and attribute the reasons why the launch of Wuthering Waves has made it more successful and having a bad launch has made it more successful, I think it's a little bit harder to nail down. But I do agree with some of the points he's made in regards to because it had such a bad launch and they've reacted really well, has definitely made people believe in the developers, which having belief in the people who are making the game is always good. And then tying the fact that the game's really good as well, it does give this idea of, okay, we've maybe got a good set of developers here that are holding on to an IP that genuinely could be something really, really good. It's already really good, but it could be like, you know, it could be one of the greats in terms of the gacha space. So I do agree with that, yeah. But that was a really good video, actually. I love these sort of videos because I like to bounce off them and it makes me think, oh, you know what? I never really necessarily thought about it like that. But some really good points. But you should definitely check out Steel, guys. A bad launch caused the success of a game. I don't know. Potentially, maybe it did, or it was partially responsible for the success. And again, we don't necessarily know how successful the game's going to be just yet, do we? Let's give it 6 months, and I think we can make that argument. But so far, loving the game.